And multiple passages in the Quran, there are different ayat and verses that describe the general traits of the believers. An example of this is again Surah Al-Mu'minun, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ, that successful are the believers who, and it lists off 7 or 8 different characteristics of these believers. But what I want to focus on today is a different passage in Surah Al-Furqan, the chapter entitled The Criteria, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the traits of the believers in a very unique way, where he focuses on a series of very unique characteristics that we're going to look at today. And not just all of them, but just the very beginning of it. And so this passage begins with the word, not to the believers in particular, only to themselves. As in the believers are the ones who believe, have taqwa, have God consciousness, those kinds of ideas. Here, uniquely though, we have وَعِبَادُ الرَّحْمَنِ, the slaves of the merciful, that were being directly associated and attributed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But not just wa'ibadullah, but rather it's one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The reason for this is because all of these traits, and the one we're going to focus on in particular, stems from and comes from this essence of rahmah, this essence of Allah's mercy. That all of these traits focus on your capacity as a merciful being. That if your Creator, who is merciful, and as a mercy upon you created you, and as a mercy upon you put you in this position to be a believer, and as a result of His mercy, you yourself are meant to be merciful to other people, then it is within ourselves that we are supposed to be merciful to other people as well. Like a few months ago, we had a khatib that came and said that we are messengers of the messenger, that we're meant to be in our actions, in our daily affairs, emissaries of Allah's rahmah, emissaries of Allah's mercy. Now one quick asterisk I want to put here is that the word Rahman, that name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the translation mercy, I don't like it as much. The reason is because they don't necessarily equally mean each other. Because when it comes to the word mercy in English, would you just look at somebody and say X person is merciful? Not really. You say that they're kind, compassionate, loving. Those are generally the positive attributes you give to somebody. But mercy implies something else. Like when you go to court and the judge says to you, I know you did X, Y, and Z, but we'll let you off easy this time. In that instance, one might say that you were shown mercy. A punishment was coming, and then you were turned away from that punishment. And therefore you're shown mercy. So the judge was merciful in that instance. The problem is that's not how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defaults to. He's not by default bringing a punishment and then He subverts it away from you. Rather, it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the ever merciful Ar-Rahman in terms of the fact that He's always unconditionally loving of the human being, loving of His creation. The best way to understand this is to look at the root of where this word comes from. That Ar-Rahman comes from Rahim, those combination of letters which means the womb. When we think about your mothers, and the womb of your mother in particular, I don't know those days when I was in the womb with my mother, but if you look at somebody from your own younger siblings, or your cousins, or just from the way we know how our mothers act, you see that there's this unconditional love, even though they haven't met the child yet in this position. That there's this unconditional care, unconditional support, for that which, at this point, they don't even know yet entirely at a personal level. So, of course, to Allah is the best example, but that's the source of where this name comes from. This idea that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala isn't merciful in the sense that there's a punishment coming, but rather it comes from this unconditional love that's everlasting and infinite, beyond your capacity to understand. That's the point of when we talk about the Rahman. So when we're being called out here as Ibadur Rahman, we have to understand that this association is a very powerful association. One that comes with a lot of responsibility. That I'm also expected, just as how Ar-Rahman, the merciful, created me, or I should say the loving created me, I am expected to act in a similar way to everybody else around me. So what's the first description here? What's one of the things that we are expected to be as Ibad al-Rahman? It says, وَعِبَادُ الرَّحْمَنِ الَّذِينَ يَمْشُونَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ هَوْنًا. The first thing here is that the servants of the unconditionally loving are the ones who walk upon this earth with humility. Now one hears this and it makes sense. It refers to how you physically walk, in the sense that you have to walk among people, not thinking that you're the boss of everybody around you. You walk around humbly, smile on your face. Like there is a physical meaning here, but it's also metaphorical too. In the sense that when you walk between people, you don't just walk in the general sense of walking on earth, but you walk from your own room, you see your roommates or you see your family. How do you interact with those people? When you go to work, when you go to school, how do you interact with your classmates, with your professors, with your teachers, with your employers? Rather, what this ayah refers to, what this verse is telling us, is that in every single daily interaction you have, from the moment that you wake up in the morning all the way till you return back to your abode at home, every interaction you have with those around you needs to be filled with mercy, needs to be filled with this love. That by default that you try your best to not cause issues and problems amongst your brothers. Because one thing that one thinks about is, yes, I can interact with people and be good to them, but there are some people that are very, very difficult to work with. People that make my life very difficult to even look at and to deal with, and we understand that. But the beautiful thing is that the ayah then answers that same problem, where it says, so the beginning is, وَعِبَادُ الرَّحْمَنِ الَّذِينَ يَمْشُونَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ هَوْنًا, then, وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا. And this is the main point of what we're going to be focusing on today, inshallah. This idea that it's not just about the fact that you walk and your default is that you're smiling or that you're a very careful person, but rather that also if somebody comes to you and approaches you, wishing to start a fight or start a confrontation or start difficulty between you and somebody else, or if somebody's just looking for trouble, someone just wants to poke a joke and he doesn't know how to filter himself with the words that he says. If anybody does that and approaches you in that way, that your response should be salama. Now, it doesn't mean that you literally say peace to that person, because that might cause a bigger fight to happen. What it means is that you intelligently and wisely de-escalate the situation. Sometimes some people, and we know this from experience, that when you are angry or upset at something or an idea or whatever the case is, generally your capacity to control your actions or your words is very limited. In the Ramadan, for God's sakes, we wake up and we haven't even fasted, we're not even hungry yet. But the fact that we can't have breakfast already makes us moody and angry. And we know this, that we can't control the things that we say sometimes. But the beautiful thing here is that we're being reminded, don't let that be your default state. And when somebody's being moody with you, or inappropriate, or whatever the case is, that your reaction should not be to instinctively yell back at them. Because we all know that when you react angrily, it just adds more fuel to the fire. It just makes things worse. That's why one of the Sahaba, Prophet he asked him for advice. The Prophet told him, لا تغضب. He said this 3 times, لا تغضب, which means don't get angry. If you can control your anger, everything else will go smoothly, for the most part. That your anger is something that's really, really critical and key for you to keep control of, and to keep yourself attuned to. You should not allow your anger to control the things that you say or the things that you do. Because we all know that sometimes when you're in that state and you say or do whatever you want, that regret follows afterwards. And that sometimes the issue may worsen to that extent. So we'll talk about a couple of small things that we can do together to reduce our tendency to react in such a way. After the break, inshallah. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه وبعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. So there was a situation that arose a couple of years ago at a local high school in the Chicagoland area. And some of my Quran students at the time, they were in that high school and they experienced this. What happened was a non-Muslim student, 15, 16, like somewhere in that range of age, he put a video on Snapchat of himself stepping on the Quran. Obviously, a very heinous act to do. So what did the Muslims of that school do? They decided that justice is in their hands, and they went and they took their way with that kid, that they hurt him in a lot of really serious ways. And the next day they came to me in class and said, Sheikh, look what we did, Sheikh, look what we did. I'm like, guys, hold on a second. You guys think what you did is right? Like, they're proud of what they did. They're part of they beat up this kid. Like, watch, I got this video of me hitting him. Like, okay, relax. Just, there's 30 of you on this one guy. Like, it's not even a fair fight to begin with. But what's the reason? Why did you do this? And they explained, we're defending Allah's word. We're defending His deen. I said, do you really think that this Quran that you read, that you memorize from, encourages you to do this? That it pushes you to want to hurt other people that harm it? They say, well, this guy's a kafir, this guy is doing this. I'm like, listen, take a step back and look at the person that you interacted with. Before this incident, when they took that video of them hurting the Quran, do you think that their perspective on Islam was positive? Probably not. If a non-Muslim went out of their way to get a Quran somehow, and then took a video posting it, intending to offend and hurt other people, chances are he didn't have a positive outlook on Islam as a faith. And then the next day, you guys came in, mashallah, as the soldiers of Allah, apparently, with those words coming out of your mouth, and then you hurt him. What do you guys think his perspective is afterwards? Do you guys think he went and said, well, you know, maybe Islam's not so bad. If they being here, there must be a reason for it. No, that's not how people think. When people are hurt, when people are attacked in this way, their reaction is almost always going to be that this just proves what I thought before. That when somebody is hurt, if they believe that Islam is violent, and then they're beat up the next day, that just proves what their thought was. So imagine that the way that you reacted, thinking you're on the right path, instead of actually guiding somebody, you misguided them entirely. And only Allah knows if that person will ever actually rethink or look back at this deen the same way again, or in a different way after this. The important thing is that sometimes people may act or say really heinous, disgusting things towards your faith, towards your family, towards other people. And oftentimes their reaction is to get even with them, to try and say that no, they deserve this. But the truth is that we need to be wise and think twice before we say or do anything. Because your reaction in those moments determines how some person may perceive this faith or even perceive you as a person. So you need to be wise to take a step back for a moment. Now I said earlier that generally speaking, we tend to act hastily and unwisely when we're angry. So how can you expect somebody who angers you to then cause you to think rationally? Because if you're angry, how are you going to think rationally? Well, the solution is that in those moments, you can't prepare yourself for how you're going to act in a moment unless you train yourself beforehand. When you think of anything when it comes to physical conditioning or mental conditioning, like when the semester started, for example, all of us came off a break where we were taking it really, really easy for the most part. And so it takes a while to transition back into studying mode and thinking about what you need to do. The same goes for work or anything else. The point is that if you don't train yourself to control your nafs, to control yourself in the face of a stimulus or a cause that may cause you to become very angry or very emotional, it's going to be very difficult and immensely problematic for you to control yourself when that issue comes. That's why the next ayah gives us the solution and the key to resolving this problem. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالَّذِينَ يَبِيتُونَ لِرَبِّهِمْ سُجَّدًا وَقِيَامًا, where the ayah says that, but the other trait of the believers are those who hold themselves in their salah, they focus in their prayers, or rather specifically they spend a long part of their night in their prayers, in sujood and while they're standing. And sujood is mentioned first because when you put your forehead to the ground, that's the ultimate sign of humility. That's the ultimate sign of you training yourself and disciplining yourself to let go of this dunya and the small things that come with it. For many of us, we've been so used to making sujood, especially in the masajid or in public, that it doesn't really make a difference anymore. But when you pray in public, perhaps in a parking lot or wherever, usually it's the reaction of the people that concerns you more than the fact that you're putting your forehead on the ground. But the reason I say this is because that training in your salah, of you humbling yourself, is what gets you ready to deal with the outside world. If you're somebody who is constantly God conscious, that you recognize that every word you say has its weight, that every action and every single reaction that you have has its weight, you will be way more cautious, way more able to control the things that you say. Some people, swearing for them is a really, really big problem. And when they slip, it's so natural for them that it's hard for them to control themselves. For some of us, lowering your gaze may be a very difficult act to do because you're so used to not doing so. When it comes to these kinds of sins or shortcomings or even good deeds, you need to train yourself for a period of time. That it comes with making it a habit over time. So it's important that we, like with any good deed or any bad deed, to minimize it or maximize it. That when it comes to you controlling your anger, the same goes for that deed as well. That when it comes to even the smallest issues that you come across with your family, with your siblings, with anybody else, that you don't allow those small causes to cause you to explode. And when you train yourself and get yourself used to dealing with these problems on a micro level, on a small level, that's what builds you up and disciplines you to control yourself in the face of much bigger calamities. A lot of the times when we face and deal with difficult people, in most cases, a lot of problems can be resolved with a very simple conversation, a very simple interaction, one that's where both people come together to resolve the problem of this dispute. But too often, unfortunately, we're in a situation where many of us will hold on to grudges and hold on to petty drama just for the sake of the fact that we can't seem to let go of it. That, no, I want to be the bigger man, I got to prove myself right. Also, the Prophet he commented and he said that if the person, or rather, if somebody is able to leave an argument, even when they're right, I promise them a palace in Jannah. Why would he say this? Because when you're right in an argument, it's very difficult to leave. It's very difficult for you to be humble enough to recognize that it's not worth my time to get in this argument or to win it at all. That sometimes when you're in a heated debacle or a heated problem, it takes a special level of humility and confidence to step away from those kinds of problems and to de-escalate the situation. That may make you look a little bit like you're on the weaker side or the more awkward side. But if all of us can make a commitment to dedicate ourselves to avoiding conflict, avoiding these problematic interactions, then that's the first step that we need to become these emissaries of Allah's rahmah, of Allah's mercy. That's what he says, وَعِبَادُ الرَّحْمَنِ الَّذِينَ يَمْشُونَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ هَوْنًا. If we want to be these kinds of ibad, these kinds of slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, these emissaries of mercy, then it's critical and it's key for us that in every interaction we have, even if it's something that's difficult with someone that really pushes our buttons, that we remain and hold ourselves to be patient in those instances. And inshallah this translates hopefully to somebody recognizing that good character in you and trying to apply it in themselves, inshallah ta'ala. And of course, this starts and it begins with your salah and your own personal development as you try to train yourself and get yourself ready for dealing with these kinds of issues, inshallah ta'ala. We'll conclude there, inshallah ta'ala, and continue with our salah. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد في الأولين وصل عليه في الآخرين وصل على سيدنا محمد في الأعلى إلى يوم الدين. اللهم احينا على سنته ومتنا على ملته واشفنا في زمرته واخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين واقم الصلاه.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
Make sure to string the rows, inshallah. After the salah, you get rewarded as if you're still praying if you remain in your seats. So please let's do that to make it easier for the announcements, inshallah, after the salah. Still Allahu Akbar. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. قل يا أيها الكافرون لا أعبد ما تعبدون ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد ولا أنا عابد ما عبدتم ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد لكم دينكم ولي دين. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. إذا جاء نصر الله والفتح ورأيت الناس يدخلون في دين الله أفواجا فسبح بحمد ربك واستغفره إنه كان توابا. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Assalamu alaikum. Khatib was brother Mara Al-Khani. Please donate to the masjid any way possible. You can use Venmo account at CIMIC. Look for the QR code posted in the masjid. Friday prayer masks. Friday prayers masks. Mask is optional. We encourage anyone who has flu symptoms to wear a mask. There's a potluck and talk tonight. Bring a dish to share. Reflections on journeying to Medina and Makkah. Panel discussion moderated by Dr. Fawzi Rahman. Dinner at 6:30. Isha at 7:15 and discussion at 7:30. CIMIC election results. The following brothers were elected: Tanwir Alam, Walid Jassim, and Zishan Ahmed. They will serve for the 2023 through 2025. May Allah help them all. Please renew your CIMIC membership. See Brother Waqar, Brother Tanwir, or Brother Marwan. Lunch. Food from Dubai Grill provided by a Bangladeshi family. Please make dua for the family. $7 donation. Jazakallah khair.
Yeah, that's what you mean.
Yeah. I was like, is that right? Am I reading that right?
What is it?